Hey everyone, welcome to the first weekly news update podcast for SNXweave, a grants DAO initiative to improve communication and transparency across the synthetics ecosystem. We'll be giving quick weekly recaps of news and important updates from the Spartan Council and core contributors. As we get closer to the end of this epic, we'll be discussing in depth the individual outlooks, voting trajectories, debating arguments, and overall values of various DAO members in order to help support well-informed voting around election time. So let's get started. It was an active week of trading on Synthetics with over $233 million in trading volume over the past week. In today's recap episode, we're going to be discussing the momentum of several SIPs, as well as what the council members had to say on each topic. Jumping right in, SIP 155 is ready to go and will soon be presented. For those who are unfamiliar, SIP 155 proposes replacing the SDAO with a Treasury Council elected by SNX stakers, as well as a core contributor committee to help coordinate and govern the core contributors. Jordan mentioned a few potential candidates on this front, but there will be more to come. Moving on, SIP 146, which proposes adding synth supply caps, is currently in icebox in favor of other solutions that are being developed. Supply caps are a safety measure against tail risk from low liquidity synths, but the core contributors are working on a more thorough framework called simulated liquidity to support synths from assets with any level of underlying liquidity. In feasibility this week, we have a few SIPs still in ongoing discussion. As the L2 rollout continues, we have SIP 169, which proposes deprecating low-volume synths on L1. There has been some disagreement about how to handle this situation, as the council is still deciding which synths to keep on L1. Kane brought up that there's no need to relist every L1 synth on L2, and that starting fresh with the synth selected for L2 might be the way to go. The SIP proposes to keep only SUSD, SBTC, SETH, and S-Link on L1, because most of the other synths don't have much usage on L1. Some of these low-volume synths also pose various front-running and manipulation risks, which can be better solved on L2. Daniel, however, would like to see some sort of compromise here to keep some of the other synths on L1. Spreek added that if some of the illiquid synths were to remain on L1, he would like to see safety measures implemented more quickly. Discussion and research on this topic is still ongoing. Next, SIP 171, proposed by Andre Kronia from Yearn, has just moved into feasibility, with Justin and Kane now assigned to it. SIP 171 proposes allowing transfer for non-fee reclamation balances, which will in turn allow for atomic exchanges in liquidity pools with fee reclamation. For context, fee reclamation is a mechanism for next price fulfillment that locks a user's balance after executing a trade until the next Oracle price updates. This forces users to wait until the next price update for a trade to execute and was originally designed to prevent front-running of Oracle updates on Synthetics. In this SIP, Andre proposes to make it possible to freeze only the pending trade amount rather than the entire wallet balance. This way, liquidity pools containing synths can continue to function while trades settle. This may be particularly useful for pools containing things like 4x synths. However, there is still ongoing discussion about whether or not to leave the 4x synths on L1 for now. Spreek also expressed concern about the possible risk that this SIP poses to Synthetics. Kane mentioned that he had spoken with Andre about this SIP and that it does not pose any risk to Synthetics. Jordan also emphasized that this is the first stage of what's potentially going to be on L1 and that the question of simulated liquidity and supply caps still needs to be discussed. Also still in feasibility is SIP 148, which proposes an upgrade liquidation mechanism. Kane, however, brought up that this is paused right now while Jackson is focusing on futures. There will also need to be an additional debt shares SIP as a way of distributing collateral from positions flagged for liquidation to SNX stakers and having them take on the debt rather than liquidating their collateral. Jackson is also working on the Chainlink wrapper SIP, which works the same as the Ethereum wrapper but for Chainlink. Also approved this week is the L2 Bridged Governance SIP, which Justin says is very close to being done and will hopefully be executed next week. More updates to come. On another note, inflation diversion for L2 incentives has been approved and has now been implemented. This SIP diverts 25,000 SNX of inflationary supply to stakers on L2, which was previously being subsidized by the SDAO. We also have a new core contributor on board, Darius, who joined Synthetix a few weeks ago. His background is in systems engineering, quantitative finance, risk management, and derivatives. He has been brought on to help with Synthetix perpetual futures, Lira options, and risk in general. Welcome, Darius. Lastly, Rafa has been working on SCCP 133, which proposes to increase volume partner rewards to 10,000 SNX per month in order to bring the rewards up to an amount that is more reflective of the volume they provide. This will also be funded via inflationary supply rather than the SDAO. This SCCP is still in vote pending, so expect more updates to come. And that's it for today's updates. Be sure to check out our weekly blog post, share this podcast link, and let us know what you think and what you'd like to hear more about from SNXweave. Thanks for listening.